The lighting of this chalice calls us to attention. As we focus on its flickering light for a moment, let us recall the shared intention that it represents, to make this a safe and sacred space for prayer and sharing, in which we can reconnect with life's depths and our highest aspirations. A community of solidarity and trust to nurture and strengthen us for the days of our lives. May this little candle be a beacon that lights the way, guiding us through these still uncertain times and inspiring each of us to paths of peace, justice, and love. Words of the Reverend Jane Blackhall. Good morning. Welcome to Cross Street Chapel. I'm grateful for your presence here, for the journeys of those who've made it through the rain, which seems to just be increasing minute by minute, and those as well who are joining us online. And whatever it is that has brought you into this space, if you're looking for a time to celebrate and to laugh and share in joy, perhaps you've come looking for a space of sorrow and repose. Maybe you need to shed some tears. Maybe you've come looking for a few words of wisdom. I hope they'll be heard. And of course, you might just come to connect with one another or to rest with the divine. Whatever it is that has brought you into this space, I hope you'll find it, and I hope you'll find a warm and welcoming community. So we lit our chalice with that focus on the sort of intention of our gathering today, that recognition of the uncertainty in our lives, but the community as well that we build together here. We turn from sort of more recent words to ones of an ancient nature with Thomas à Kempis's The Imitation of Christ. Everything that is perfect in this life has some imperfection bound up with it, and there is nothing we investigate that is without its darkness. Humble recognition of what our nature is will lead more surely to God than profound searching for knowledge. Learning, or the simple knowledge of facts, can be good and instituted by God, and then there is no fault to be found with it, but a good conscience and a holy life must always be preferred. We, of course, as Unitarians, very much acknowledge and celebrate science and fact and the world as we explore it. But this exploration shouldn't be limited to the exterior world, but must as well engage with our interior lives and experiences. So once more, to reaffirm sort of our gathering today, let us sing our first hymn in the Purple Book, number 62, Alicia S. Carpenter's Here We Have Gathered, hymn number 62.
Oh
We turn now to a time of prayer with these words of the Reverend Lucinda Stevens Duncan. This is followed by our covenant, which is printed in your order of worship and will appear online. But first, these words. Eternal Spirit, whom we call God, you are our life. You are the best and the most beautiful in us and beyond us. Your spirit is in animals, birds, plants, and in people whom we do not know of, whom seem very different from us. All of us share the gift of life. Help us remember that life is good. Help us to know that we don't stop loving people or other living things when they are no longer near us. Love lasts always. May we look for ways to love one another and to love all living things. Amen. And please read with me our covenant. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build a beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. Today's story, as it's sort of hopefully self-explanatory by the title, is about two frogs. And these two frogs knew each other from the time they were tadpoles. They were born and grew up together, and they were the best of friends. And they lived in a little stream in a small sort of gulch by a farm. But they didn't know that. All they knew was this stream. And one day, one of the frogs said to the other, "Well, I feel like exploring today." And the other one said, "Oh yes, that sounds like a lovely day out." So they decided that they would hop out of the river and just explore their surrounding area. So they did just that. So they got out of the river. They went up the side of the bank, and they were in the middle of a sort of wooded patch. They made their way sort of through that. They were kicking off some of the leaves and sort of sticks and detritus that was stuck to them. And they eventually made their way out of the woods into a field. And obviously because they're frogs, they're not especially tall. And the grass, which hadn't really been taken care of, was for them certainly enormously tall. For us, it wouldn't be a bother, but for them, it looked like skyscrapers. So they made their way through the grasses with it brushing along their sides, and they really enjoyed this. They were having such a spectacular time discovering this world that was unknown to them and unusual to them. They continued through these tall skyscraper-like grasses, and they saw things even taller, massive animals, white with black patches or black with white patches, and they were eating these tall skyscrapers of grasses. They also saw these other sort of, not quite as tall, but pretty big beasts, which looked like fluffy clouds, and we might recognize them as sheep, but that's, of course, not what these frogs knew, since all they had known at that point was just this quiet, gentle stream. So they went past the cows, which is what they were before. They went through the sheep, and they eventually came to this massive structure, the biggest thing they had ever seen. Stones and huge walls and huge doors, huge sort of rumbling noise coming on from the inside. But that, as shocked and amazed as they were by that structure, by that building, they were very interested in a much smaller structure on the outside, just by one of the doors. We would look at it, we wouldn't think it was very big, but we would recognize that it is a bucket. And by this point, this took the whole morning, mind you, to get out of the stream, to get through the woods, through the fields, up to this sort of farmhouse. And they saw this bucket, and they were very hungry, and they were very thirsty, and they thought, I bet there must be something delicious in that bucket. And so they saw a few sort of bricks and stones, and so they hopped up popped up until they could peer inside. And when they looked inside, what do you think they found? Milk. Thank you. Yes. This is a farmhouse. It's the noise is the milking machines. We've met the cows before. So they did see the milk and thought, well, this is new. This is going to be something interesting. I'm curious to know what this tastes like. So they hopped in to this giant bucket of milk, and they enjoyed it. They had a lovely time. They were splashing around. They were lapping it up as these frogs managed to be able to do in one way or another. But then they had their fill. They had their fun. They were quite tired now, so they thought that it might be better to retreat back to the stream. But unfortunately, because they are tiny frogs, and it is a big bucket, they couldn't just hop out. Their legs wouldn't get to the bottom of the bucket. Their arms wouldn't get to the top of the bucket, and they were stuck. They were stuck in this giant bucket of milk. They tried sort of pushing from one side to another without any luck. And one of them eventually said, well, maybe we could fling ourselves out. And they said, well, how would you do that? Well, maybe if we held ourselves together and we spun around really quickly, and then we let go, we'll just fly out. And that's what they tried. They held onto their hands and they just ran around as quickly as they could, but nothing was happening. The water was all splashing about, and you might expect that they might get some leverage out of that, but it wasn't enough to get them out of the bucket. This is quite worrying. So they said, the other one said, well, we just have to keep trying. I know it's not easy, but we have to keep trying. So again, they held hands and they were spinning around in the bucket, and they kept doing it. They were getting very tired, very, very tired, and the milk was getting more and more difficult to get through as they were splashing and splashing and pushing and trudging and stepping until the milk became butter. And at that point, they were able to stand on the top and leap out of the bucket. Okay. A little story about two frogs. So you have a chance to share your stories now. They don't have to be quite as energetic as that. Your joys, your sorrows, your trials, as well as your triumphs. If you want to share those, you can light a candle. If you have a few words to say, please come to the microphone so those who are listening online, as well as those who are using the loop system, will be able to hear you. If you are online, you can type into the chat box and we will read your message out. You're invited, of course, to light a candle in silence if you so wish. And as always, if you want to remain seated, know that your presence here is enough. And I've been asked by Anthony, our Wednesday organist, to light a candle. He has had some health issues recently. He was in A&E, I think maybe even last night. So please do keep him in your prayers as they sort of try to figure out what it is that he's facing.
I'm lighting my candle for my old workmate, Liz, who's a good friend of mine, a lovely woman, and she's had terminal cancer for a few months now, and she's back in hospital and she's very confused, and she rang me on Friday morning, 2 o'clock, and talked to me for half an hour, and then she rang me at 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock, poor thing, and I'm not sure yet whether that confusion is a reaction to the medication or something a bit more sinister in terms of the cancer. And so my candle is for her and her husband and her daughter and other family and friends.
I'm a long-time member of this chapel, but I've been away for one reason or another for a good number of months, so it's good to be back here, and I'd like to celebrate that for myself as well as for everybody else as a lifelong third-generation Unitarian and member of the International Association for Religious Freedom. I'd like to share with you a poem by the Jesuit, 19th century Jesuit poet, Gerard Manley Hopkins. We're some weeks off the season that he is referring to in this poem, but we're approaching the autumn solstice. So this is Hurrahing in Harvest by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Summer ends now. Now, barbarous in beauty, the stooks arise around. Up above, what wind walks, what lovely behaviour of silk sack clouds. Has wilder, wilful, wavier meal drift mouldered ever and melted across skies? I walk, I lift up heart, eyes, down all that glory in the heavens to glean our Saviour. And eyes, heart, what looks, what lips, yet gave you a rapturous love's greeting of realer, of rounder replies. And the azurous hung hills are his world-wielding shoulder, majestic as a stallion stalwart, very violet sweet. These things were here, and but the beholder wanting. Which too, when they once meet, the heart rears wings bold and bolder, and hurls for him, oh, half hurls earth for him off under his feet.
Well, after about 3 years, my sister has finally passed into another realm. And on Friday, I heard the news that she died. I'm just very grateful that I had all the opportunity to have those difficult conversations that people don't always get to have. And I'm just hoping that you would be able to keep her 2 sons and grandchildren in your prayers.
That's a birthday candle for my father, who would have been 108 today, died 10 years ago. And my son in Australia sent me a message, because they're 12 hours ahead, last night, and said, just to say, Mum, happy birthday to Gampy. And I was just so thrilled that we're all apart, but we were all together.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Heron from Belfast, Northern Ireland. I'm a retired minister of the non-subscribing Presbyterian Church in Ireland, and I dare to bring you greetings from that august body. I'm moving to Manchester in the next 3 months to be closer to my relatives who all live in England. My relatives in Ireland have all passed away, especially my wife, who next week will have died 10 years ago exactly, and I light this candle for her. I'm looking for a community of faith in Manchester, and I was recommended to come to Cross Street by my colleague, the Reverend Dr. David Steers, whom some of you may know, and I hope that I'll come back again and feel comfortable here.
For all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. And let us sing now our second hymn, again in the Purple Book, Elizabeth Alexander's As We Sing of Hope and Joy Today, hymn number 6. Our second reading, first reading, if we count the first one as a story, is by the author Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks is an American author, theorist, educator, and social critic who was a distinguished professor in residence at Berea College, best known for her writings on race, on feminism, on class, and the intersection of all three. This is from her book, All About Love, which is perhaps one of her most well-known writings. And this is chapters entitled Spirituality, Divine Love. And although she's writing from an American perspective, I do think there is some relevancy here. Our national spiritual hunger springs from a keen awareness of the emotional lack in our lives. It is a response to lovelessness. Going to church or temple has not satisfied this hunger, surfacing from deep within our souls. Organized religion has failed to satisfy spiritual hunger because it has accommodated secular demands, interpreting spiritual life in a way that upholds the values of a production-centered commodity culture. This is as true of the traditional Christian church as it is of New Age spirituality. It is no accident that so many famous New Age spiritual teachers link their teachings to a metaphysics of daily life that extols the virtues of wealth, privilege, and power. For example, consider New Age logic, which suggests that the poor have chosen to be poor, have chosen their suffering. Such thinking removes from all of us who are privileged the burden of accountability. Rather than calling us to embrace love and greater community, it actually requires an investment in the logic of alienation and estrangement. The basic interdependency of life is ignored so that separateness and individual gain can be deified. Religious fundamentalism is often represented as authentic spiritual practice and given a level of mass media exposure that countercultural religious thought and practice never receive. Usually, fundamentalists, be they Christian, Muslim, or any faith, shape and interpret religious thought to make it conform to and legitimize a conservative status quo. Fundamentalist thinkers use religion to justify supporting imperialism, militarism, sexism, racism, and homophobia. They deny the unifying message of love that is at the heart of every major religious tradition. No wonder, then, that so many people who claim to believe in religious teachings do not allow their habits of being to reflect these beliefs. Imagine how different our lives would be if all the individuals who claim to be Christians or who claim to be religious were setting an example for everyone by being loving. From Spirituality, Divine Love by Bell Hooks. And let us return to a time of prayer with these words of Edward Hayes. Comfortable and well-worn are our daily paths, whose edges have grown gray with constant use. Our daily speech is a collection of old words worn down at the heels by repeated use. Our language and deeds, addicted to habit, prefer the taste of old wine, the feel of weathered skins. Come and awaken us, Spirit of the New. Come and refresh us, Creator of green life. Come and inspire us, rain and sun. You who make all things new. We are too young to be dead, to be stagnant in spirit. High are the walls that guard the old, the tried and secured ways of yesterday, that protect us from the dreaded plague, the feared heresy of change. For all change is a danger to the trusted order, the threadbare traditions that are maintained by the narrow ruts of ritual. Yet, how can an everlastingly new covenant retain its freshness and vitality without injections of the new, the daring, and the untried. Come, O you who are ever new, wrap our hearts in new skin, ever flexible to be reformed. Set our feet on fresh paths this day, to inspire us to speak original and life-giving words, and to creatively give shape to the new. Come and teach us how to dance with delight whenever you send a new melody our way. Amen. And so we now enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. Let us sing now our third hymn in the Purple Book, Shirley Arena Murray's Come and Find the Quiet Center, hymn number 21. Who here has heard of mental hygiene films? Thank you. Even if you haven't heard the term, it is very likely, I certainly know from the States, but I imagine here as well, very likely that you have seen one or two or many in your youth. These were films that were shown in schools. There's sort of the golden age of mental hygiene films was the sort of 50s through to the 70s. But they have carried on in some way, and I went to school in the 80s and 90s, and very much remember sort of some of them sort of cropping up here and there. They were films that provided information on a wide range of subjects, and because they were intended to promote good thinking, good knowledge. They were called mental hygiene or mental health films. Topics included anything from sexual health to development, stranger danger, driving safely, relationships, civics, anti-drug films, just about anything and everything. There's even one of my favorites that's called Mr. Be Natural, which is about making sure you can choose the right instrument. And it just so happened that the right instrument happened to be a Con Selmer instrument, who happened to also produce the film. Funny how that works out, isn't it? The films are depicted now as a form of nostalgia. If you're watching a sort of movie about the 50s or the 60s especially, it's very likely, that features a school scene, it's very likely that they will have one of these mental hygiene films playing. The most well-known one in the States was called Duck and Cover, which was about sort of taking care during a nuclear bombing, in which, of course, students were encouraged to duck and cover themselves under their school desks. As I mentioned, these films were popular in post-war America. They still exist, though. I remember the awkwardness, particularly, of watching films about puberty, followed by an equally awkward silence as we were expected to ask any questions that we might have. It didn't help that my sex ed teacher happened to also be he was one of the teachers at the school. He was also actually the father of one of my close friends, which just added to this all sort of very, like I say, awkward silence to the whole endeavor. But actually, so sex ed, and then the other thing in the States that they're particularly well known for were in driving schools. During their driver's ed, the teachers would put on a film about sort of proper driving. The films about safe driving are actually perhaps the most interesting to explore regarding today's subject. And bear with me, as I know this might all seem quite tangential to the topic of a sermon, because you can see in these films a cultural shift over the decades. Earlier films focused on basic rules of the road, on driving courteously, on the decency that's inherent and necessary for driving, which is important for teenagers with their hormones, as we know from puberty, their hormones all wafting around as they take this sort of big step, driving, as they're making that journey into adult responsibilities. But these early films were not particularly effective. And so you can see in the 60s and especially in the 70s the introduction of more shocking films showing the real consequences of driver error. These films are certainly out of favor, or were out of favor by the time I took driver's ed, which had returned to more sort of calm films, for which I'm very grateful, I should say. I cannot imagine the trauma that students would have experienced watching these films with such violent realism in them. So the films did not always or often work. And one theory about this, about why these films didn't work, was that they were basically just shown. They were shown without critique or without subject. The teacher put them on, dimmed the lights, and the students might have difficulty staying awake or paying attention. Afterwards, the projector was put back in the closet, the maths textbook was opened, and the next lesson began. Some films came with accompanying questionnaires and discussion points that the teachers were encouraged to use with their students, but I don't think they often were. So some people suggest that the lack of conversation meant that the children did not fully absorb the message of the films. And when the films were less effective, the producers and the directors took to more viscerally potent and, as I said, violent, genuinely violent imagery, which seems to mimic that general shift at that time to gritty realism that we see in cinema, and with just as much effectiveness as the earlier films. So mental hygiene, if you need a lesson from this, is only good if you floss. We might argue that any form of health requires some measure of hard work, whether it is physical exercising, eating properly, expanding our knowledge, developing our capacity to question and critique, whether it is our self-care or whether it's some spiritual development like prayer. There has to be some commitment and some concentration. Even if that practice is mindfulness and the whole endeavor is about emptying ourselves, That act of emptying requires us to have a time and a place and an intention to do the emptying. A second question here. Who here belongs to a gym? So you can challenge the accuracy of what I'm going to say next. Do you mind if I ask, how often do you go? We're online, but there's always the answer of not responding.
Between 0 to 3 times a week.
0 to 3 times a week. Thank you, Aaron. Some studies have suggested that gyms, to remain solvent, rely on people not going. It relies on people joining the gym, in that sort of fit of, well, I need to get healthy, becoming a member, going for a short while, but then actually stopping. So they keep their membership, either because they've forgotten to cancel it, or they have that ambition of returning one day. So part of the business model relies on not everyone who is a member taking advantage of their membership. It's a bit cynical, perhaps, but there may not actually be enough gym equipment available for all the members to use on a regular basis. That's slightly mind-blowing to me. That's not a problem here for our members. And we do have a formal membership scheme. We, of course, welcome people who participate in the life and the community of the chapel, even if membership is not their thing. There isn't a set fee for becoming a member, but we are grateful for the contributions that people give to help keep this chapel afloat. We recognize, like we did last week, that many people contribute in many ways beyond the purely financial. And we're not hampered by this weird business model of the gym. We have that physical capacity for new people. We have the seats, we have the hymnals, we could even use a projector if we needed to. There's enough mugs, and tea is available, almost. And tea is available just around the corner if we need to purchase some more. We can bring in more chairs if needed, for instance, for larger events. So when we don't just have a physical access capacity, we also have time. Groups like RE, Religious Education, can meet at different times. Thanks to things like Zoom and other technologies, we're not hindered if the chapel is booked. So we can run extra courses. We can run another worship if need be. We can make time for new people that join our community, howsoever they want to get involved. So we have the physical space, we have the time capacity. But do we have the relational capacity? Our religion calls us to not only explore our own convictions, to set them in this crucible of reason, so to speak, but also to welcome the stranger. This means not simply making sure the door is unlocked. It is ensuring that they feel able to bring their stories with them, their whole self, that they can be given a shoulder to cry on if they need it, that they can find an ear to listen to as they find words to speak of their condition. The stranger, much like the new gym member, may not have the same spiritual poise or flexibility as others. But being a welcoming congregation means giving them the space, the time, the resources, the relationships, and the companionship to grow into their faith. And many people go to the gym alone. They want to do their leg day and are not keen on engaging with others. Others actually enjoy the social atmosphere, learning about people's routines or perhaps even their lives outside of the workout. And so it is here. Some people may simply want to come to share worship, perhaps snag a biscuit before going on with their weekly lives. Others may be excited to engage with the community, to discover new things, to share their experiences, and to bolster people. So this is the responsibility of all of us. It is more than simply just meeting on Sunday. Membership, and I use a sort of small m membership for our church, is more than just a leg day for the soul. Our faith reminds us that we are not simply unconnected individuals. I say all this because I've often thought of church membership as being similar in a way to gym membership. not in that cynical business model that I spoke of before. But in some way, it is not just being a member on paper that makes a difference, but actually taking part in the chapel. You can pay for a gym membership, but you're unlikely to see much difference in your life if you don't actually go. Similarly, we can profess to being Unitarians, but if we aren't exercising, if we aren't practicing our faith, it is unlikely to make much of a difference in our lives. This is not simply about attendance at the chapel. I want to be clear that I know we have our challenges and our commitments, and I'm not expecting everyone at every service. But I do want you to think, when do you think about the chapel when you're outside of the chapel? Do you have that spiritual practice, such as meditation or journaling? Do you pray? And if so, do you consider including those who are here, even if you aren't? Now, this may be preaching to the choir, as you are all here. And I know you care deeply for our faith and its potential, not just potential, but actually necessity at this juncture of history. It is imperative that we hold and live our life and our faith not only for this hour each week, but for each day in between. I recall a sermon that I heard years ago, really powerful, really moving. The preacher was talking about the pressure that society places on churches, and specifically on that sort of pressure for people to not go to church. There's so many Sunday activities. There's Sunday trading hours. There's Sunday football clubs. There's all sorts of things that sort of pressure people to not go to church. And he was upset about this and talked about that, in this slightly meager way, that the church did not have much that it was asking of society. He described it as 1 hour a day, 1 day a week. And I loved that expression. And I held on to it for a long time, for about, I think about 12 or so years ago, I remember hearing it. Now, however, I look through the other side. What can that 1 hour a day, 1 day a week do for us for the rest of our lives? What can that 1 hour a day, 1 day a week do for our communities for the next generation? What can that 1 hour a day, 1 day a week do for all creation for the rest of eternity? The answer is not much if we leave it here. The challenge and the joy of our faith is that we have to work with it. It challenges us not just to discover our own beliefs, but to engage with the great diversity of beliefs around us. And just as we are seeking to preserve the diversity of life within this planet, we seek to bolster those whose beliefs may be different, provided they serve the individual and harm not others. Bell Hooks, writing 25 years ago, saw a spiritual hunger in the U.S., a hunger that, like physical hunger, made people vulnerable to abuse, vulnerable to cruel belief systems, vulnerable to social isolation and self-loathing, vulnerable to financial exploitation. Our charge is to protect the vulnerable. It is to explore the great beauty of the world, and this includes those who are marginalized, to recognize their inherent worth and dignity. Also, to see it in those who are beguiled by a system of privilege and benefit, the hidden hand of the patriarchy, white supremacy, and other false gods. We must work for our faith. And work is sometimes decried as a dirty word, but this is not its frustrating flaw, but it's actually its greatest asset. A faith that calls us to be part of creation, to share our beauty and joy, and to work to bring some goodness to the world. So let's not skip leg day for our soul. Amen. A few notices and announcements before we sing our final hymn. We are hosting the Unitarians for Climate Justice on Saturday in a seminar they're calling Faith in Our Future 2. It's a whole day program from 11 to 4. I think there's, it's free. I don't know if it's free, but they ask for a donation. There's details online and flyers set about. Part of it will certainly involve Professor Jeff Livermore, who's a well-known Unitarian in this area. He's also a Nobel Peace Prize winner, so we're quite excited to have him. And he's the current GA president, or Unitarian president, for us this year. So we're grateful to welcome him to Faith in Our Future to Saturday at 11 o'clock. The 27th, we have our own Friday lunchtime recital at 1 p.m. featuring the Cal Wind Trio. Our recitals are always free to attend, but we are grateful for donations, which go to the artists to recognize their time, their talent, and their energy. So please do join us for that. And then our own climate conversation is on the 22nd, Sunday at 12:30. And then finally, on the 28th of September, the National Unitarian Fellowship is also holding a one-day conference from 10 to 4. There's a poster which I'll set outside for this, featuring the Reverend Andy Phillips and Claire McDonald. So please do join us for that as well. That's £10, and the details about purchasing tickets for that is available on the poster. Is there anyone to help with the tea and coffee today? Thank you, Carl. We're always grateful for people who, for volunteers, for people who help out with providing the IT. How's the IT been today, Alvin? Excellent. They make it as easily accessible as possible. So even if you aren't even if you're a bit cautious about IT, it's possible, for you to participate that way. And there's other ways as well: greeting, reading, providing flowers, helping out with the teas and coffees, and so forth. We're grateful as well for any donations that can assist the mission of our chapel. You can donate online at justgiving.com/Cross Street Chapel Manchester, or you can email me about setting up a standing order. There's a retiring collection for those here in the service, but if it is your first time with us, your presence is your gift for us, so please don't feel obliged to contribute financially. Are there any announcements or notices from the congregation? Let us sing our final hymn. The words are in your hymn book. The words are in your order sheet. John Andrews' story is, "The church is not where altar stands within the hallowed walls." Thank you, Aaron, for that fantastic music. Thank you, Alvin, for the IT, Carl for the tea and coffee, Joe for helping to set up. And thank you to everyone for creating and sharing worship today. We close with these words of Angela Marr. "We are blessed with an abundance of good things for which we are truly thankful, as long as we remember them. We are privileged with great freedom and power, for which, in return, we act with responsibility. We are lucky to have shared this time and space together, because we are lucky to have each other. May the spirit of this place and these friends go with us into the busy city. Amen."